This is Wickett on Wisconsin. My name's Mike Wickett. After 10 years in Milwaukee talking sports, I took a bit of a break, but now I'm back and here to talk about the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers, and more with you. And now inside the Koss Headphone Studios, this is Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. Hey, what is going on? Got a lot to get to on this podcast, all right? We're going to hit the first couple of days for the Milwaukee Bucks and how strange this season has been from a basketball standpoint. We're going to do that coming up in a bit. And also, speaking of strange, the first week and change now is in the books for the Milwaukee Brewers and the Major League Baseball season. And the Brewers are just a conundrum because the Major League Baseball season is a giant question mark. I'll get to that coming up in a bit. But I'm recording this on the day that the Big Ten schedule has come out, and that is important to me because I'm a huge college football fan, and I know if you're watching or listening to this podcast, then you probably are a UW fan. You're probably a Wisconsin Badger fan. Now, before I get to anything, we have to make sure we clarify the Big Ten schedule and looking at the Badgers schedule and all of this with the caveat that we all understand that still this may not happen. This season still may not actually happen as we're all sitting around here in the first week of August and, you know, fall camps are set to open this weekend according to the Big Ten. According to the Big Ten commissioner, the schedule is set for camps and stuff to open around the conference coming up on Friday. Okay. Today's the 5th. They're supposed to open up on the 7th, and then we'll get to some of the first games. The first Big Ten game is Ohio State and Illinois. So as we talk about all of this, I want you to, of course, make sure you're thinking about, and this is all optimism. I have a lot of optimism that this is actually going to happen, that we're going to get Big Ten football. I don't know if I believe in my optimism, but this is going to be as if we get the schedule. Now, remember, we only get 10 Big Ten games. They've done away with the non-conference games. And the strange thing about that is we've done away with the non-conference games because of travel. Like, that's the number one reason. But the Big Ten schedule doesn't limit travel. Here is the entire schedule. If you're watching on the video, and I'm not going to break down every single game, but the Big Ten schedule is out. What's interesting to me is the next to last week of the season, the entire Big Ten East, Rutgers, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Maryland, and Indiana, they all have that entire week off. The week before, everybody in the West, except for Illinois, and they get a bye week during that Big Ten East bye week, everybody else, the Badgers, Purdue, Northwestern, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa, they have the week off. Again, Illinois and Rutgers will play that week. Illinois is in the West, Rutgers is in the East, and there's some scheduling question marks there for sure. The other interesting part is there's a week off in between the final week of the season and the Big Ten championship game. Should there even be? Again, I don't want to keep saying, should there be a season? Should there be this? Should there be that? So always remember it. But there is a week off in case games have to get pushed back and moved around. And this is really, it's crazy what they've done to make this schedule even a thing. This is from The Athletic. The final iteration of the 2020 Big Ten fall football schedule was nicknamed Jenga 41. Jenga 41 by the league office because it has 41 collapsible games, meaning the two teams that have an idle week in common for which the game can be rescheduled on or before November 21st, which is that last game of the season for everybody. Divisional games and rivalry matchups were prioritized to receive maximum flexibility. So if you're looking at the Wisconsin schedule and you're saying, why is Wisconsin playing Minnesota in week 4? They open up with Indiana, then they play Northwestern, then they play Nebraska, and they play Minnesota in the battle for the Axe the last week of September. Well, they did that because they know how important rivalry games are. Another example, Michigan and Ohio State. They are playing in October 24th. Michigan will play against Ohio State. Obviously, that's always the game, and it's usually the last game of the year. It has been that way forever. But because of COVID, and it's like building in rain delay games, which Major League Baseball decided not to do, but it's building in delays. for the opportunity if games have to get moved, if entire teams have to get quarantined, whatever. It's maximum flexibility. So back to the Badgers, if that game has to get moved, if you're going to have to move a game, it doesn't hurt as much to move Nebraska, Northwestern, Illinois, whatever, but it allows you an opportunity to move the Minnesota game. That's why the rivalry games still matter in the Big Ten, and there is some wizardry in all of this. Big Ten Assistant Commissioner Kerry Kenny said it had 41 different options. 41 different options to slide something out and slide it back in somewhere else. So you have all these different pieces that have to get moved. I think it's amazing to me what you have there, and the artistry and the math and the scheduling. Like, I'm glad I'm not going to be, in charge of that Big Ten schedule, because that had to take them a long, long time to try to get everybody to play against everybody. But taking a look at the Badgers schedule here, the Wisconsin Badgers will open up on September the 4th against Indiana, allegedly. That game is supposed to take place at Camp Randall. The following week, they'll go to Evanston and play in front of the high school crowd at Northwestern, if there even is crowds, and we don't even know if crowds are going to be a thing. After that, it's against Nebraska in Lincoln, and then back home against the Gophers on September the 26th. Again, that's the Axe game, but there's room to move it should they need to move it later on in the season. The Badgers should be 3-0 going into that game against Minnesota. We don't know the specifics on some of these positions, especially at the quarterback spot, whether you're a Graham Mertz guy or you're a Jack Cohn guy. I mean, Cohn completed 70% of his passes, but what's his ceiling? That's always the question about Jack Cohn. The Badgers should be 3-0, and you would think coming home to play against Minnesota, I mean, home field advantage is going to be so strange in college football. I mean, think about playing at Camp Randall in front of half a crowd, or Camp Randall in front of 25% of a crowd, or playing at Camp Randall with 0 fans. If fans aren't allowed in the games, what's it going to be? Do you do jump around? I would assume you're not going to do the jump around, but you know what? I don't know everything. I don't really know what to make of that. The rest of the schedule, they go to Maryland. Now, this brings up an interesting question that was brought up on my Facebook page. If you go to the Mike Wickett Podcast Facebook page, the Mike Wickett Podcast Facebook page, there's always, content there that I'm going to try to get your reaction to and bring up and talk about on the podcast. Dan writes, I'm confused. Why couldn't Wisconsin play Notre Dame, but they can travel to Maryland? That's a wonderful question. That is a tremendous question, and I don't know the answer to it. Why can Wisconsin go to Nebraska, go to Evanston, go to Maryland, but they couldn't play Notre Dame because of travel? Because of what? They couldn't play Notre Dame at Camp Randall, but they can go to Maryland. That strikes me as a really, really good question. Unless it's all about just Big Ten network money, Big Ten. I mean, generally speaking, when questions like that come up, it comes down to dollars. And could the Big Ten, you would assume the Big Ten was going to make a bank load of money off of Notre Dame and Wisconsin at Lambeau Field. You had to think that that was the case. But there's some probably, I guess back before they completed this schedule, they thought, let's just do in conference so they only have to worry about so many games and so many teams, and doesn't include the 12 teams in the Big Ten and Notre Dame. It's a really good question, because later on in the season, after they play at Maryland, they come back home for Purdue and Illinois. Both should be wins. Then they go to Ann Arbor and play on Halloween at the Big House at Michigan. Honestly, Wisconsin should be 6-0 going into that game. Check that, 7-0 going into that game. They should beat Indiana, Northwestern, Nebraska, Minnesota, Maryland, and Purdue and Illinois before they go to Ann Arbor. Now, Wisconsin generally trips up at some point against some team that you don't expect them to trip up against. It was Illinois last year. Remember that? It was Illinois. They should have pummeled Illinois, but they lose in overtime, and then they get thumped by Ohio State. I would expect them to think about that the following year in 2020, if we have a season, to remember the Illini game a year ago. After they go to Ann Arbor, they come back and go to Iowa, and then they end the season against Rutgers. Ben pointed out on Facebook that this is an interesting year on that schedule because they skip Ohio State, they skip Penn State, and they skip Michigan State. In any year, that's usually that's usually all three big boys out of the East. Now, Penn State's probably going to be good again. Ohio State's probably going to be top 5, if not number 1 in the country again, because it's what they do. But it is a good year to skip those two. Michigan State's on the down. It's the first year since, with no D'Antonio. So it's probably a good year to get Michigan State. But hey, you take some, you win some, you lose some. And if you're in the West, you take what you can get out of the East. So they're going to skip Michigan State. Wisconsin skips Ohio State. Wisconsin skips Penn State. The schedule looks incredibly favorable, in my opinion. I mean, I really think it does. I think if you are looking at that schedule, you got to say to yourself, boy, this ain't bad. This definitely is not bad at all. Again, they should be 7-0 going into Ann Arbor. Should they beat Michigan? They're 8-0. Then the big rivalry game with Iowa, and then Rutgers. I mean, that's not a bad schedule whatsoever. I kind of like it. I definitely like it for the Badgers. That's a good run. There are some questions, though, that come up about travel and all these other things that we were so worried about because of COVID-19. And I don't know if this is actually going to happen, as we keep saying over and over again. And Jerry writes, by the way, that if the Big Ten was really concerned, reading from the Facebook page, if the Big Ten was really concerned, they would have eliminated travel between the East Coast and the Midwest. Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers could have been set free this season to seek their own regional schedule, and the Big Ten would just not have a conference champion this year. Interesting, but here's the thing: money. There's no way the Big Ten was going to let Penn State play at a game and not make the money that they can off however they plan on making the money. There was no way that it was going to happen. And that's, again, say what you want about this whole thing, the scheduling and everything. It always comes back to the dollars that they were going to be able to do. And one of those teams they may have scheduled on the East Coast could have been UConn. Well, news comes out today that UConn has decided they're going to punt football. They're just not playing this year. I don't know if they're going to go to the spring. I can't remember what they were going to do, but they're not playing. So I think what UConn is saying to the rest of the college football world is, hey, you know what? It's okay to not play football this year. They're canceled their upcoming season. On Wednesday, the University of Connecticut football team announced the cancellation of its 2020 season. The AD, David Benedict, said the safety challenges created by COVID-19 place our football student athletes at an unacceptable level of risk. Now, UConn's not Alabama. UConn's not Ohio State. UConn's not Wisconsin. UConn's UConn. But they're a pretty big program, pretty decent program. And for them to say we're canceling it, they're not going to be the last. They're certainly not going to be the last to do so. So the Big Ten schedule comes out. It's all played with the caveat of if. We know that. And we'll just have to wait and see, what's next. Fall camp opens Friday on the 7th. Going to be a lot of testing. And you know what? Kids are going to get COVID. It's going to happen. Could be Jack Cohn, could be whomever. But the kids are going to get COVID. It's just going to be part of college football this year. And it just depends on how many programs can contain it. Who does it spread to? Who gets really sick? And I remember I did a podcast a while back about baseball with Josh Vernier and Sparky Pfeiffer. And Vern, who works as the Royals insider down on 610 in Kansas City, he asked a good question. He said, what's it going to take to cancel the baseball season? And I'm going to talk more about baseball in a sec, but what's it going to take to cancel the college football season? 10 Badgers, 6 Buckeyes, 5 Wolverines, 3 Boilermakers, 6 sick coaches, somebody who has to go to the ICU, somebody who gets really, really sick. What if Kirk Ferentz catches it? Kirk's no spring chicken. And Iowa's got their share of problems, too, off the field. Maybe I'll save that for another podcast. But what's it going to take to shut this thing down? I don't know if there's any standard that's out there right now. So we're going to have to play this all by ear. But it is cool to see the schedule come out and get to talk about some college football, which is always nice. And I'm so glad that we get to. I'm shocked we are, and I'm still not believing we're going to have a season because, as we're seeing, leagues that don't have the bubble don't work. Whereas teams that do have the bubble do work. And that would be the NBA. The NBA itself right now is saying, hey, look at us. We have got a working situation right now with the bubble. 0 positive tests so far as opposed to Major League Baseball. Guys so far are following the rules, which is nice to see. And by the way, isn't it great just to be able to watch NBA basketball? I loved the first weekend. Just it has felt like March Madness NBA style because you've had so much basketball on wall to wall the last couple of days. And whether it is, a team you enjoy like the Bucks or whatever your team may be or whatever, it's basketball. It's great to see basketball on, and I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying it. In terms of the Milwaukee Bucks, can we talk real quick about a couple of things? I want to give you my breakdown in all 3 games for the Milwaukee Bucks. They're 1-2 as I record this. They beat the Celtics on Friday night. They lost to the Rockets on Sunday, and they lost to the Nets on Tuesday. Talk about all 3 of these games here real quick because I don't know what you can take away from 3 games in this situation because the Bucks, unlike everybody else, they don't have a ton to play for. They can lock up the East if they win another game or if the Raptors lose another game. The Bucks don't have a ton to play for, so I don't know if you can make serious assessments out of the first 3 games. Their effort and what you saw on night 1 against Boston, that was the closest thing to the Bucks I believe that you will see once we hit the postseason. I believe that's truly what the Bucks are going to be like. Night 2, ugh. And by the way, night 1 was without Eric Bledsoe too. So if you threw the real Eric Bledsoe into the effort the Bucks gave you on Friday night against Boston, I feel like you're going to see a team that's going to be very difficult to beat. I really do. What can happen? How do you beat a team like that? Well, you do what Houston did on Sunday night. The Bucks turned the ball over 22 times. Now, there was no Eric Bledsoe. Your starting point guard was not there, and Dante DiVincenzo had an awful game. He had a terrible game, throwing the ball all over. Looked like the game was moving too fast for him. He just had a bad game. Dante DiVincenzo thrown into that role. He had himself a bad game. 22 turnovers. Bucks, doesn't matter who's running point for the Bucks. If they turn the ball over 22 times, they're going to lose. Any NBA team is going to lose when they turn the ball over 22 times. It's going to happen. And then there's the other half of it. The Bucks are not a great perimeter defense team. They pack the paint, as you've been hearing on the broadcast, and as you know from watching this team play, they pack the paint. They load guys in the middle, and they make you hit threes. They'll throw somebody out there, but they're not going to defend the perimeter like they're going to defend the interior. And that hurts when you're playing against a team that loves to shoot the 3 like Houston. And if Houston, who tied the record for most 3-point attempts in a single game, if you're playing a team like Houston who loves to shoot the 3 and shoot the 3 more than anybody else in basketball, playing against the Bucks is a great recipe for you. And if Milwaukee faces Houston, let's say in the finals, or another team that loves to shoot the 3 like Houston loves to shoot the 3, they're going to have to figure a way out to defend the perimeter better than they did on Sunday night because that, again, was a recipe for disaster. Turning the ball over and not D'ing up on the outside against a team who loves to shoot and is good at shooting the 3. That's how Houston won that basketball game. And then Tuesday's game, listen, there has been some criticism of those that have been watching the NBA inside the bubble, that it feels like a summer league game, that it doesn't feel like a real game, that it feels just sort of fake and hokey. And I poo-pooed that all weekend because I enjoyed watching him play on Friday night, and I enjoyed Chris Middleton showing up on Sunday and having a great game on Sunday, and Giannis over the first 2 averaged 36 and 17 and 8 or something ridiculous. And you like to see the stars play well for the Bucks. The 2 guys that are going to drive this thing, and other guys hitting shots. I mean, guys were hitting some shots all weekend. And then you get to Tuesday's game. And rarely is an NBA team a 14-point underdog, but the Nets were a 14-point underdog to Milwaukee on Tuesday. And there weren't too many people that were going to bet on the Nets straight up. I mean, and they won. and they won that basketball game. Now, nobody told you, and only Coach Bud knew that the starters weren't really going to play much, if at all, in the second half. I mean, Giannis had, 16 in the first half or something like that, and the second half it was a lot of DJ Wilson. It was a lot of Sterling Brown. It was a lot of the backups getting a lot of the minutes, and it was the first time, because I think I saw 8 of the Nets that were on the roster had played in the G League. And they had Jamal Crawford on the team as well. He was a late signing, and Jamal Crawford hadn't played for the team this year. It was a scrub game. It was an NBA Summer League game. It was a scrimmage. And the Bucks lost, and whatever. Again, I go back to my original point about the Bucks, and that is this is a team that doesn't have a ton to play for, trying to get some more guys some meaningful minutes, and I'm sure that's what it was. And Bledsoe got back out there, and he was okay. He needs to get back up to speed, and Pat Connaughton's got to get back up to speed after both guys missed time following their positive COVID tests. But it was the first time, Tuesday's game was the first time where I sat back and thought, boy, this is uninteresting. And it was a close game. Nets won by 3. And it is what it is. It was a game that the Bucks probably should have won. But it does, again, the whole caveat, all of this is still, does it even matter for Milwaukee? If they can get one more win, they can rest everybody. And I said I did a little pregame podcast before the Bucks and the Rockets, and I thought, boy, I kind of want to see Giannis get rested. I want to see Chris Middleton take a break. I want to see guys rest their minutes. And somebody criticized me for that, and I said, well, maybe Coach Bud will do that later on. I didn't realize he was going to do it on Tuesday for the entire starting 5 in the back half of a game against the Nets. So it was the first time it felt like a very summer league-esque kind of basketball game, and I was disinterested in the second half. Yeah, I kept it on. I was feeding a baby. What were we having? Avocado and apple. Yum, right? All pureed. It was fine. Like, they'll get another game in. They'll hopefully get another win in. Giannis already looked like an MVP again. Did you see Doug Gottlieb from Fox Sports Radio said that Giannis doesn't have the clutch to win, and it's being exposed in the bubble? Dude averaged 36 in the first 2 nights in the bubble. 36, 17, and 7 or something like that in the first 2 nights in the bubble. And in that game against Houston, he accounted for 2 or 3 of the Bucks' 22 turnovers. Dude's doing just fine. It was the fact that Houston shot well. The Bucks turned the ball over. DiVincenzo was horrific in that game. Don't listen to criticism like that. I just sometimes wonder, man. Sometimes wonder how guys like Gottlieb have that gig. But the Bucks are going to be just fine here in this remaining 5 games of the 8 before the real playoffs begin. Trust me. They're going to be just fine. Just fine. And we're learning that bubbles work. There have been no positive tests so far in the NHL bubble, none in the NBA bubble thus far. Meanwhile, there is baseball to talk about, and there has been baseball to talk about, thank God, because baseball has been back for about 2 weeks now. They were first, and we talked about it last week. Baseball has been a bit of a disaster. Not a full-on disaster, as social media would make you believe, but we know what happened with the Marlins, and they had to shut down their games, and then more games, and then more games. And then we found out last week that while they were at the Pfister, or they were being quarantined at the Pfister because the Cardinals tested positive for COVID-19. And you're trying to figure out why and where and how. And the next day, we found out that the Saturday game was getting canceled, and then later the Sunday doubleheader that was to make up for Friday's game that got canceled. All of it was getting wiped out. So the Brewers lost an entire weekend's worth of baseball because the Cardinals contracted COVID-19, and it was spreading a little bit in their in their clubhouse. And whether it was 1 guy or 2 guys or 3 guys, you're trying to figure out, how did this happen? And then Colton Wong, the second baseman, had posted a couple of pictures on his Instagram. First one was him, he took a snapshot playing Whistling Straits from Thursday. So they get in town. There's a potential deadly virus that's incredibly contagious that your entire league hangs on the balance of it not spreading. And what does Colton Wong do? Goes out and plays golf. I don't know if he contracted it there, but then the next day, there's a picture of him with a big face shield and a mask underneath, and it said, what a difference 24 hours makes. We found out that I think up to 6 or 8 members of the Cardinals had tested positive. We also found out rumors are out there that some of the St. Louis Cardinals decided to go and play some cards or gamble, whatever, at Potawatomi in downtown Milwaukee. Now, I've been to Potawatomi. I like Potawatomi. Casinos generally aren't the cleanest places in the world when there isn't a pandemic going on. And the Cardinals decided to go gamble a little bit at Potawatomi. Now, it's a little bit ridiculous to think that playing golf at Whistling Straits and then going to Potto and playing blackjack or whatever is where they contracted it because of the time frame. They went there on Thursday. Some tested positive Friday. Some tested positive on Saturday. Well, we turn out, I have a whole super spreader theory that I can lay out for you. Turns out that the Cards contracted it in Missouri. As a guy who used to live in Missouri, I can tell you this. They are not, I talked to a lot of people down there. They are not taking this virus terribly serious. At least the governor down there, Mike Parson down there, is not taking it very serious. It's one of the worst states, one of the hottest states in all of the Midwest. All right. And when I'm trying to find my, let's see if I can scroll and find this on my phone. I'm trying to find my super spreader theory about the St. Louis Cardinals. This is my theory a week ago. The Cardinals play and live in Mike Parsons' coronavirus hotbed petri dish of Missouri. They hosted the Pirates in St. Louis the first weekend. Days passed, the Pirates took a souvenir back to Pittsburgh and then may have passed it on to the Brewers. No positive tests yet, thank you, during their 3-game series. The Cardinals just left Minneapolis, so there's a chance that they got or gave it to the Minnesota Twins. The Twins hosted the Indians. The Indians better get tested a lot over the next 2 weeks. They pretty much do because, it's Major League Baseball. And remember, the Cardinals, get this. This is where I think it actually came from. The Cardinals played the Royals 9 days before this mess started with the Brewers. Kansas City is a COVID hotbed. Kansas City is a mess. Their mayor, my friend Quentin Lucas, has already come out and said, wear a damn mask. Kansas City is a mess. St. Louis is a mess. Kansas City hosted Houston, who then hosted Seattle and L.A., and then went to Detroit and Cleveland. That's how a super spreader can happen. That's how it can start. And if this did begin in Missouri and then got brought to all these other different cities, that's on the Cardinals. And Rob Manfred came out and said the players have to do a better job following the rules. Yeah, but the rules really allow for a lot of 25-year-old millionaires, 30-year-old millionaires to go out and be stupid. Adam Silver and Gary Bettman, they may have done this right by putting teams in bubbles. It may have been the smartest thing to do because now you're seeing this thing spread with the Marlins and now the St. Louis Cardinals and the Phillies games were canceled. I just want to know how they plan on making these games up with St. Louis. How will the Brewers make these games up with the St. Louis Cardinals? There's not enough days built in. There's only 6 off days built in this 60-game sprint that we have right now. And the Brewers I think they play in St. Louis in September, and then St. Louis comes back or something along those lines. I'd have to look up the exact dates, but you're going to have to schedule a lot of doubleheaders to make up for these games that they missed. Guys already hate playing doubleheaders. And then there's going to be rain delays and more. I mean, the whole season's about to get stacked up on top of itself because I think Major League Baseball made a tremendous mistake by maybe 60 games was wrong. Maybe 50 games was the right way to go to build in more days for things like this. And I know social media is talking about the season becoming an absolute disaster and falling apart. It's not. There's taxi squads. There's 60-man rosters for a reason. I know those get reduced at some point, but there's protocol built in for if this sort of thing does happen. So what does Major League Baseball do the next time that this busts out? That another team, let's say it's the Braves or it's the Orioles or whatever, or the Yankees. What happens when that team goes out for a night, goes to a bar, one guy gets it, brings it back, and it spreads? Do we stop this all over again? How goofy are the standings going to look if one team has played 52 games and another team has played 60 games and they can't squeeze in all the other games? Like, there's so many things that are hanging in the balance in all of this because Major League Baseball didn't do what the NBA and the NHL have done. I mean, you've got Cardinals and Tigers are postponed today. Cardinals and Phillies and Marlins are postponed today. Yankees and Orioles are postponed today. That's a lot of baseball teams not playing. That's 20% of your league is not playing baseball today. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. As for the Brewers, they're 3-5. They got thumped by the White Sox yesterday, 3-2. Couldn't find themselves a hit when they needed it. I don't know what to make of a team that's only played 8 games. And the big news for the Brewers, you've got Ryan Braun, who's out with an infected finger. Just the latest weird injury for Brawny. I mean, he has one of those every single year. Intercostal, the thumb, whatever. Braun's going to miss some time. And then Lorenzo Cain has opted out. I can't fault the guy for opting out because he's worried about his health and his family's health. Like, it sucks to lose Lo Cain. Lo Cain wasn't a great player last year. He was an above-average player last year. In 2018, he was fantastic. So it was going to be interesting to see what he did in the 60-game sprint. He'll be back next spring, maybe. There's just a lot of question marks about the Brewers. Christian Yelich is off to an absolutely god-awful start to the year. As we predicted, some guys who are great are going to have bad starts, and some guys who are horrendous are going to have great starts. Well, right now, that guy is Christian Yelich, and he's off to a terrible start for the Brewers. I mean, he is 3 for 34, hitting .088 on the year. Avisail Garcia is your leader so far after hitting .292. Ben Gamel, his fan club, is building. He had a boom the other day against the White Sox. What was that, Tuesday night? He had a home run. Orlando Arcia is hitting .353. He's 6 for 17. Lo Cain was hitting .333 when he decided to stop the season. But, they're 3-5. If they can get one against the Sox, if they can get back to 500 again, I had this team at 30-30. Not an exciting prediction. I saw some people say they were going to win 40. I don't think they had enough talent to be consistently good to win 40. But if you can hover around 500, get on a hot streak, have a good week, bounce back up and finish at 35 wins, that's probably going to put you in contention for a playoff spot, especially with the expanded playoffs. So good luck to the Brewers the rest of the way. It almost feels like, as a baseball fan, like you turn them on, you start watching BA and Rock and Sophia, and you watch the games on Fox Sports Wisconsin. It almost kind of feels like you're waiting for that other shoe to drop, isn't it? Like, someone accused me of being on Team Virus the other day. I'm not on Team Virus. I'm not rooting for the virus. I'm saying it's a possibility, a very realistic possibility, and I am almost waiting for that next shoe to drop as I'm watching these games thinking, is this going to matter? Am I committing 3.5 hours to watching a baseball game with no fans in the stadium to a team, to a league, to a sport that a month from now might be shut down? I hope I'm wrong. I hope my skepticism is completely out the window, but we'll see. I mean, 2 weeks in, we've got a bunch of games postponed, canceled, whatever you want to call it. I hope no more happen for the Brewers, and I hope they get on a hot streak, and I hope they can get themselves into the playoffs, because it would be great to go deep into October talking about a run for the Crew. Hey, that's going to do it. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll have a very special episode coming up this weekend, so stay tuned. We'll definitely do some more before Bucks games. Those pregame shows were fun, getting your feedback live on Facebook. I'll let you know when those are going to happen so you can participate in them as well. We're on Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts. I appreciate you checking us out. Please tell a friend about us, especially if they're a Wisconsin sports fan. This has been Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. As always, go Pack, go Bucks, and go Brewers. Thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin. If you have any feedback or you want to reach out to the show, you can find me on Facebook, Mike Wickett Podcasts, or you can email MikeWickettPodcasts@gmail.com. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter @Mike Wickett. Thanks to Silverman Sound Studios for providing the music for today's show. And you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Until next week, thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin.